Yep, patch release day is pretty much the same on all games and sims we play. G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to IL-2 Stromovic, the Battle of Moscow, and I can say that for sure now, because it's finally arrived. The Ju88 A4 is now available in the beta to those who have pre-ordered. Now this is actually a rather important moment for the Battle of Moscow expansion pack, because the Ju88 A4 is the last aircraft of the lineup of 10 that was going into this expansion pack for Battle of Stalingrad, and with it comes a few things. A few updates to a couple of maps, but more importantly than that, the campaign mode is now in, as well as the unlock system being fully enabled. The Battle of Moscow beta is now only a beta in name. It's going through final bug testing and will soon be a fully released product. And so far I'm pretty happy with everything. Everything has come along quite nicely. But we're not here to talk about the whole expansion. We've saved that for another video another day. Today we're here to talk about the Ju88 A4, so let's get into the cockpit and take a look around this thing. The Ju88 A4's cockpit is both impressive and a little to the cluttered side, if I'm entirely honest. You'll notice immediately the big machine gun sitting to the right hand side at the moment. The MG81 takes up quite a lot of real estate, and then if you look down just underneath it, you'll notice that it is also its ammunition feed, as well as its blowback to catch the ejected shells and to suck the spent propellant gases out of the cockpit and away. Blocks up a lot of your engine gauges on the right hand side. You've sort of got to lean back and around in order to be able to see what is actually on those gauges. Although I did find a trick jumping into the bomber view and looking up, you can see them as well. So first things first, taxiing the Ju88 A4. Now, taxiing this thing from the cockpit is an absolute nightmare. Due to the angle that the aircraft sits on and the shape of the instrument console, you actually can't see the ground directly in front of the aircraft, so you cannot see where you're going. Thankfully, you don't have to taxi it from there. From the cockpit view, from the pilot's view, look to your left and right and make sure there's no other aircraft moving out of the taxiway, and then you jump into the bomber's position. As you can see, he has a near perfect view of everything directly in front of the aircraft, so you can taxi out smooth as silk. Your only problem is you have almost no ability to look left or right, which is why you have to check left or right from the cockpit first, or from the pilot's position first. Now, taxiing the Ju88 isn't done entirely with brakes. There is no need to touch your rudder or any of your control surfaces whatsoever. The way I have my keys bound up, I actually drive the entire aircraft off the throttle quadrant. I have no need to touch my flight stick until I'm about halfway through takeoff. Left and right brakes turn the aircraft on the ground, carefully rocking your control or your throttle back and forth to control your speed. And most importantly of all, take your time, don't rush it. This is a relatively heavy aircraft for its size, and it has a lot of weight on its wheels directly under the wings. If you run off the roadway and you run into the soft stuff, especially on the snow maps, it is likely you will bog in and you will be unable to free the aircraft. So take your time. Pilots that rush get stuck on the side of taxiways or crash into 109s. So we've made it down to the runway. How do we take off? Well, this is actually the most difficult part of this aircraft. If you do what you would with any other aircraft, set your propeller RPMs to 100% and then gently bring the throttles forward, the plane will torque off the side, usually to the right, and crash you into the trees on the side of the runway, every single time. What I found is the best way to do this: close your engine outlets completely. You don't need the radiator at this point. Set your propeller RPMs to around about 50%, and then gently bring your throttles forward. Hands off the control stick, you don't need that yet, and just sit on the brakes like you were when you were taxiing around. Now, what I'm looking at the moment is the drift meter, just to the left hand side of the artificial horizon. Now, the drift meter is telling me where the plane is turning, because I cannot see the runway clearly. I try and keep that needle as centered as I possibly can. Now, I'm going to go slightly left on this particular run, but try to keep it as central as you can as you're going down the runway. When you finally get your throttles to 100%, then begin to bring your prop RPMs up to 100%. By the time it makes 100%, the tail should be off the ground, and at that point let go of the brakes and begin steering the aircraft by rudder. Until you have enough airspeed that the tail has lifted off the runway, the rudder doesn't have enough authority to counteract the torque of the engines. So you need to get your airspeed up. That's why you use your brakes first. Do not use the rudder, or do not even bother using the rudder until the tail is up. At that point you have enough authority to keep the aircraft straight, and takeoff proceeds normally from there. Now, you can start the takeoff run with your flaps already down. I tend to drop the flaps at around 100 kilometers an hour once I've got initial airspeed up. Gets me going a little bit quicker. Once your wheels are off the ground, retract your landing gear as soon as you possibly can. Once you've passed 200 kilometers an hour, retract your flaps and put them in the sealed position, and then remember to open your engine cowlings up to about 50% so you don't overheat your engines. Now, at this point, you're still on 100% throttle and 100% RPMs. Drop the RPMs back to 80 and back the throttle off to about 80 as well. This will put you in the entry area for your climb mode. Climb mode lasts 30 minutes. Do not leave it at 100%. That's takeoff power. You can only maintain that for about a minute. If you hold it for any longer than that, your engines will explode. So what about once you're in the air? What have you got to do then? Well, honestly, not really a lot. This aircraft, without a doubt, is the most difficult of the fast bombers to actually get off the ground, just because there's a particular sequence you have to follow to actually get it up and going in the first place. It's more difficult, I find, than my beloved HE111. It's more difficult than the Stukas by far. Those things are easy. Same again with the Peshkas. It really is the hardest, possibly the hardest aircraft in IL-2 to get up, simply because you've got to know this sequence in order to get it off the ground, and if you try a more traditional takeoff, you're likely to spin out on the spot. Once you're in the air, however, this is the best flying aircraft in IL-2. It requires almost no control input to keep it straight and level. If I let go of the controls, the plane will very slowly bank off to the right, but at a rate where I could take my hands off the controls for 30 seconds and I wouldn't actually deviate more than a few degrees off course. Its climb rate, even with a bomb load on board, and at the moment I'm carrying 2 tons, 4 500-pound bombs, all mounted externally, so I've got massive amounts of drag on, and this thing's climb rate is not that far behind what you would expect a heavy fighter to climb at. Actually, I think it may actually climb better than the Bf-110. Don't quote me on that, but it certainly feels faster. Definitely feels faster than the Peshka. To top it off, once you go into continuous mode, this aircraft can run in continuous mode until it runs out of fuel. Continuous mode's good for over 400 kilometers per hour. This, without question, makes the Ju88 A4 the fastest bomb truck in IL-2 Stromovik. And unfortunately, it is just a bomb truck. Don't let the reticle you can see in the center of the screen fool you at the moment. This aircraft has no forward-firing guns. Now, I know that some Ju88 models were fitted with forward-firing weaponry, and the reticle on the screen does give you an indication that the aircraft may be able to fit some with some modifications. However, at this time, there are no modifications of the Ju88 available within IL-2 Battle of Moscow that fit those guns. That being said, as I said a moment ago, you see the reticle there. It makes you think they probably will. This is really, well, I'm recording this at the day after it was released, so maybe a modification in the future once they've done a bit of testing with it. I don't know. I really do hope they do. This thing would scare the bejesus out of IL-2 and Peshka pilots. Now, the Ju88 was possibly one of the most versatile aircraft available to the Luftwaffe forces during the earlier and even later parts of World War II. This thing was a level bomber, it was a dive bomber, it was a night fighter, it was an attacker. Occasionally there were cases where it was flown as a heavy fighter. It was used against naval shipping, it was used against armour and personnel, bunkers, hardened facilities, air force bases. Hell, it was even used against cities. If you can think of a role that an aircraft could potentially do inside of World War II, chances are the Ju88 did it at some point in its service life. And I just have to drop a bit of an apology here too. This is on the Wings of Liberty server. For some reason, chat was very active this day, and I'm not entirely sure why, so try and ignore it. But anyways, for today's first flyout, we're going to be flying across the Soviet border, and we are going to use the Ju88 in my favourite job role, as a dive bomber. Now, we've got a little bit of time while we transit out to the factory, so there's actually something a little extra that I want to tell you guys, or actually I'm going to read out to you guys. Much like in War Thunder, which I'm sure most of you who are watching this channel have played or do play or whatever else, IL-2 has a stat card, an aircraft specification sheet. Now, I just want to read out the information that is on this sheet. I'm just going to read it out from top to bottom, because this is what a stat card or a specification sheet should read like. This is amazing. So we've got Ju88 A4, indicated stall speed in flight configuration, 188.205 kilometers per hour. Indicated stall speed in takeoff landing configuration, 158.185 kilometers per hour. Dive speed limit, 670 kilometers per hour. Maximum G load factor, 8G. Stall angle of attack in flight configuration, 20.0 degrees. Stall angle of attack in landing configuration, 16.6 degrees. Ground speed at sea level, engine mode climb, 424 kilometers an hour. Maximum ground speed at 2,000 meters, engine mode climb, 462 kilometers an hour. Maximum ground speed at 5,000 meters, engine mode climb, 486 kilometers an hour. Service ceiling, 7,500 meters. Climb rate at sea level, 7 meters per second. Climb rate at 3,000 meters, 5.1 meters per second. Climb rate at 6,000 meters, 3.4 meters per second. Maximum turn at sea level, 33 seconds at 250 kilometers an hour IAS. Maximum performance turn at 3,000 meters, 50.5 seconds at 250 kilometers an hour IAS. Flight endurance at 3,000 meters, 3.8 hours at 300 kilometers an hour IAS. Takeoff speed, 170.210 kilometers per hour. Glide slope speed, 210.220 kilometers per hour. Landing speed, 150 to 160 kilometers per hour. Landing angle, 9 degrees. Note, the data provided is for international standard atmospheres. The flight performance ranges are given for all aircraft possible mass ranges. Maximum speeds, climb rates and turn times are given on standard aircraft mass. Climb rates are given for climb power, turn times are given for takeoff power. And then it goes on. Engine, model, Ju88 maximum power at takeoff mode at sea level, 1,420 horsepower. Maximum power in climb mode at sea level, 1,190 horsepower. Maximum power in climb mode at 1,500 meters, 1,260 horsepower, and maximum power in climb mode at 4,900 meters, 1,180 horsepower. Engine modes, normal, unlimited time, 2,250 RPM, 1.5 atmospheres. 1.15 atmospheres rather. Climb power up to 30 minutes, 2,400 RPM, 1.25 atmospheres. Takeoff power up to 1 minute, 2,600 RPM at 1.42 atmospheres. Water rated temperature in engine output 80 degrees Celsius. Water maximum temperature in engine output 110 degrees Celsius. Oil rated temperature for engine output 100 degrees Celsius. Oil maximum temperature 130. Supercharger gear shift at altitude is automatic. Empty weight is 8,619 kilograms. Minimum weight, no ammo, 10% fuel, 9,458 kilograms. Standard weight, 12,110 kilograms. Maximum takeoff weight, 13,655 kilograms. Fuel load, 1,277 kilograms or 1,680 litres. Useful load is 5 tons. Defensive armament, nose 7.92mm MG81, 750 rounds, 1,600 rounds per minute. The rounds per minute is the same, these are all MG81s. Top is a 7.92 MG81 with 1,000 rounds, and the belly is two 7.92s with 950 rounds total. Bombs, and it goes through the entire bomb load capabilities of the aircraft, and then finally finishes up with the dimensions, with a length of 14.3 meters, wingspan of 20.2 meters, and a wing surface area of 52.7 meters squared. And its combat debut was June 1941. That is an IL-2 stat card. It leaves you absolutely no questions as to the capabilities of the aircraft. And what's even more magnificent about that stat card is all of those numbers correspond to the historical numbers for the Ju88 A4, and they correspond to the aircraft that you see in-game. If you test at any of the levels listed, that is the performance you will be able to achieve. Yeah, I'm very, very much impressed with that. But anyways, getting back to the match, that rather long talk about the specifications of the Ju88 has brought us to the point where we are beginning to look for the factory that I'm about to dive bomb. Now, the factory itself, I was actually really worried was going to get the Wings of Liberty effect, as I like to call it. That is to say, whenever you try and spot a target from high altitude, a large target like a factory, either to high altitude level bomb or to set up a high angle dive in order to dive bomb a target from altitude, on the Wings of Liberty server, There is an extremely high probability that there will be a cloud formation directly over the top of it that will prevent you from being able to see the target until you're below 1,000 feet and underneath the cloud bank. Thankfully it wasn't the case on this particular pass. I got eyes on the factory a little later than I would have liked, but nevertheless I got a clean line on it and started my dive. Now, one of the things I noticed immediately with diving the Ju88, while it does handle well, it also seems to generate a lot of lift. It constantly wants to pull itself out of the dive, and I think that is actually something the Ju88 had by design. Still, this was my first dive bombing run in the aircraft, and it caught me a little bit by surprise. Now, you'll notice I'm being fairly careful on my approach. I'm trying to keep the red line that goes around the top of the cockpit level with the horizon, but never under it. This is the maximum dive level for the aircraft. If you exceed that, you can potentially do a lot of damage to the aircraft or find yourself in a dive that you're unable to pull out of. Although, as it turned out, that was the least of my problems. I'm sure you can see the massive list of damage that I took to the right-hand side. I was expecting the factory to have some AAA defences. I was not expecting 61K 37mm anti-aircraft guns, and I most certainly wasn't expecting the base to be completely painted in them. And more than that, I wasn't expecting them to be so goddamn accurate. That popping sound as I was diving in was the aircraft being hit over and over and over again by 37mm rounds, high explosive anti-aircraft rounds. The damage was crippling. There was no way known I was going to get this plane home. I did manage to keep it in the air for about another 8 minutes before the engines really started to fail. Dropped the air brakes again and tried to find a spot where I could put the plane down in between the banks of trees, but unfortunately, as soon as I started hitting close to stall speed, the damage became very evident. The plane started rolling heavily right, and in she went. Although this shouldn't be held against the aircraft, I took multiple 37mm strikes in this plane and still managed to fly away from the base and get back over the Soviet-German border and halfway back to my base. It really is a fantastically durable little aircraft as well, which I'm really enjoying flying it if it's not entirely evident. But anyways, it turns out this factory had been completely untouched before me, so I decided to go back and have a second crack at it, but this time we're going to be doing it level bombing style. The Ju88 A4 is equipped with exactly the same bomb sight as the HE111 that's already in game, and it calibrates in exactly the same way. Now we're going to do our level bomb drop here from just below 3 kilometers at just above 350 kilometers per hour. Now in the last dive bombing run, I let all 4 bombs go on the left hand side of the factory. This time my plan is I'm going to drop 3 on the right hand side, and then I'm going to tip the aircraft over and I'm going to dive bomb the 4th in the center. Unfortunately, while I did plan to drop the bombs on the right hand side, I was a little bit too far to the right for my liking. I was trying to bring it in over the main factory and I was just slightly to the left. But this is 3 500 kilogram bombs, so precision is a little to the optional side. So I got the 3 bombs away. I opened up the bomb bay there for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. All 4 of the 500 kilogram bombs are mounted externally. Call it force of habit. And then I jumped into the lower gunner's view and I was trying to see whether or not I can get a good enough angle here to see the bombs detonate. Unfortunately, no, not quite enough. So we just hold flight for a few moments while we wait and see whether or not our bombs fell true. I'm waiting for the kill screen to come up on the left hand side indicating whatever I've taken out, and also to open up a big enough gap on the base so that I can turn this plane into a dive and come back to try and put one in the center, and there we go. The bombs have hit, so I begin my bank around and it's time to turn in and deliver this last bomb. Now once again, air brakes on the dive down. We have to be a little cautious of our dive speed. We are diving from 3 kilometers up, or just slightly under 3 kilometers up. Throttle's right back, RPM's right back. I want to take all of the aircraft's performance in this dive out of the equation. I just want to let gravity take over, and we're going straight for the center of that base. Now I'm hoping the dive bombing pass from the first one and the level bombing pass have taken out the majority of the AAA. It looks like we're right on target here. Release the bomb, immediately pull up. You can hear the aircraft groan under the G-forces there as we begin our pull-out. Throttles and RPMs back to 80% apiece, so I'm in continuous mode for the pull-out. Looks like I pushed the throttles forward slightly too fast there and ended up slightly torquing the engine. This has done some light engine damage, but nothing serious. In fact, it doesn't bother me the whole way back to base. I fly back and land without any issues. And the kill report comes up, and that is the annihilation of the factory. The entire factory has been taken out, and it took me 2 passes in 2 Ju88s with 4 bombs apiece, 4 tons total to do it. Now you could easily achieve the same feat, of course, with a HE111. Even a single HE111 with the right bomb load can potentially wipe out a factory of about that size on its own. The difference here is the Ju88 is so fast that it will take off from the same runway, drop its bombs, and be halfway back to base before the HE111 even gets to the bomb site. As a strike bomber, this is without a doubt the best bomber in the game, and being as IL-2 multiplayer battles tend to be very speed focused, this is the best bomber in the game now, or at least in my opinion. The bomb carrying capability of this thing is phenomenal, and the way it performs, the things you can do with it, the speed you can move at, and how quickly you can get to targets. I love the HE111, but I'm not entirely sure I'll be flying it all that often anymore. Anyways, ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Click like if you did. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.